camera and broadcasting. Going live.
Hi everyone, we're just going to wait a minute or so just as we let everyone come on into our Zoom webinar today, and then we will get started. All right, we'll get started very, very shortly, just letting a few people come on through. Okay, well, we might get started this evening. Well, evening for you, morning for us here in Australia. So my name is Katie. I'm an education officer here at Reef HQ Aquarium in Townsville, Queensland, Australia. Joining me in the room as well is Julie. She's going to be monitoring the chat function and the question and answer function. So if you've got any questions for us throughout, pop them into the chat and the question and answer. We'll try and answer those along the way. But to start with, what I am going to do is pass on over to Fred Nucifora, who is the Director of Education and Stewardship for the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. So Julie, would we be able to hand on over to Fred? There we are. Hi, Fred.
Good morning, Katie. How are you? And good morning, everyone that's connected in this morning to join us as part of our Great Barrier Reef live presentation to you all today. I would just like to, first of all, start this morning's session by acknowledging First Nations peoples and traditional owners from all of the places that we are joining this conference from today, and pay my respects to their elders, their elders past, present and emerging. And I look forward to this session today. And I'd also just like to acknowledge a couple of dignitaries in the room with me today. I'd like to acknowledge the president of the City University of New York, Bronx Community College, Dr. Thomas Sekenegbi. I'd also like to acknowledge Provost, Dr. Lester Rapallo. Hey Lester, good to see you again. And also Consular General from India, Sandeep Chakraborty, as well. It's an amazing opportunity today for us to bring our little piece of the Great Barrier Reef to you all, and share our knowledge and experience with you. And I hope that you will share your knowledge and experience with us. So without further ado, I would actually like to hand now to a good mate of mine, Professor Neil Phillip, who's a dear friend and someone that we've been establishing a really great collegial and positive relationship between both us here in Townsville, North Queensland, and City University of New York, Bronx Community College, there through Neil. And I know Neil's been to visit us a couple of times here, and I was fortunate enough to spend some time with Neil in Brooklyn at the end of late last year. So Neil, welcome, mate, and I'll hand over to you.
I apologize for the screen in the back of me. It's so excited I can't, it's jumping. Even the screen is jumping in the back of me, Fred. So thank you everyone for, for this. Thank you, Fred, and the Great Barrier Reef and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority for, involving Bronx Community College and CUNY in this novel and great educational opportunity for our students and our staff and everybody. In fact, we have people from 5 different countries here today, from 5 continents actually. We have Africa, we have Canada, North America. We have even the Caribbean, of course, Australia, India as well. So this is a great opportunity for us. And again, we like to just thank the people who made this all happen. Again, Fred and the staff and Craig and everybody else at the Great Barrier Reef Authority. And also on our end, we had, our provost, the president who were supportive, Derek Skeet, Paramita Sen, Professor Sen. We have had Paul Marchese as well, Reggie Blake. And we all have students logging on today to this event. So thank you, Fred. And I'd like to recognize the president of our great university, our great school, Bronx Community College and CUNY. President, you want to say a couple words? You're muted, so you can unmute the mic. Yes.
This is really fascinating. I mean, it's COVID has been a bad experience, but one of the good things out of COVID-19, I can't say is that we've been able to use technology to connect to different parts of the world. Neil, you're becoming good at this every day. Remember, we just did India, I believe.
We did Canada, yeah.
This is to go on that all the way from Australia. This is really wonderful. I was joking to somebody about an hour ago that I'm going to be connecting with Australia. He said, there's no flight. I said, no, really. We're going to be having Australia in our living room through Zoom. So this is really wonderful. This is really great. To our friends in Australia, good morning. And in fact, I can't wait to listen to the presentation and see what you have for us. I think we are environmentally conscious, and the Great Reefs play a huge part in our environment. So getting to know more about it, I think is really beneficial for all of us. So I'm looking forward to listen to the presentation. Neil, Paramita, and to all of our people on this side of the world, thank you for putting this together, for making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, President. I'd like to introduce the Provost, Lester Rapallo. Santos Rapallo is a big supporter of study abroad and things abroad. Lester?
Yes, thank you so much, Neil.
Spotlight you, Lester.
Thank you so
There
much.
we go.
Can you hear me? Thank you so much for the opportunity. I echo our president and our leader, Dr. Sekenekbi. I'm so happy to be starting this collaboration and continue building bridges that connect not only human beings, but a beautiful cause, which is to save and keep improving our planet, because when we do that, we improve our quality of life. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and this is the only planet that we have, so we have to take care of it. I do want to echo and say thank you to our colleague and friend, Dr. Neil and Paramita, for being always ahead of the curve, making these wonderful connections that help both countries, United States and Australia. So I'm very honored and humbled to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I do love your slogan, Fred. See the reef, love the reef, and protect the reef. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Is the Consul General here, Sandeep Chakravarti? I don't think I think we had another appointment. Fred, I'm going to pass it back to you, and we're looking forward to some fish and chips in Australia very soon.
I know.
Okay, on the Strand.
Yeah.
Neil,
Thanks, Neil. I'll hand over to the education team now, and they're going to take you all on your virtual scuba dive of the Great Barrier Reef today. So enjoy, everyone.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thanks, Fred, and thank you, everyone else. But we might jump on in, and I mean that literally, because we are about to jump on into our coral reef exhibit here at Reef HQ Aquarium. But just before we start, I'll mention a couple of things. So the Great Barrier Reef is in miles. Oh, what have we got? Wrong way. 1,430 miles long. Had to do the conversions this morning because I only know it in kilometers. And it is very, very large. So if you do think about a football field, the size of a football field in your head, About 75 million of them will fit within the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. So very, very big. And it's not just made up of coral either. So only about 6% of the marine park is made of coral reefs. The rest of it's made of all sorts of other habitats. You've got mangroves, you've got islands, you've got open oceans, seagrass beds, and all sorts of other habitats. There's also a huge biodiversity out on the reef as well. Lots and lots of different animals. All sorts of different types of fish. You've got mollusks like snails, things like Econoderms, they're your sea stars and sea cucumbers, and definitely things like reptiles. So we have 6 out of the 7 species of marine turtles found within the marine park, and all sorts of different sea snakes as well. But what I can currently see is that our scuba diver Craig is in our coral reef exhibit, surrounded by lots of pretty cool fish at the moment. So I reckon the best way to learn about the reef is to dive on in. So what we are going to do is we are going to hand on over to Craig. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. Hi, Craig.
G'day, Katie, and a very warm welcome to everyone, wherever you're connecting to us from. Welcome to Reef HQ Great Barrier Reef Aquarium here in Townsville, North Queensland, Australia. Now, we are underwater in an aquarium. It holds 2.5 million litres of water. It's regarded as the largest living coral aquarium in the world. And we'll spend about half our time having a look at a typical reef community, much like myself and my dive buddy Ryan might see if we were to go out our back door and a short boat ride to the actual Great Barrier Reef. Once we've had about half an hour or so in here, we're going to get out of the tank. There'll be a short intermission while Ryan and I get underwater with some of our larger fish. So we'll have a look a little bit higher up the food web at some of those predatory fish, including a few small species of sharks. They'll be a bit sleepy at this time of day, so that might be good for us to get a little bit closer to them. I've got a full face mask on, and that allows me to talk to you through this microphone. I've got a set of earphones so I can chat with my team, and we can answer any questions that you might like to put through the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar facility. And so if there are questions you'd like to pose, feel free to submit them, and we'll try our best to answer them as we go. Sometimes the bubbles go past my ears and my team on the other side have to shout at me a couple of times, but we work around that. I might take the camera from my dive buddy Ryan. Perhaps you can practice your best Australian accent and give Ryan a nice big wave and say, "G'day, Ryan."
Good day, Ryan.
There's Ryan. And he'll follow us around today as we go and check out some amazing marine life.
Now, Craig, before we start, there's a few questions about what time is it here in Australia, what is the temperature of the water, and how deep are you? So if you can give us those general answers.
Yeah, in fact, I was thinking of covering those at the start and I forgot, so thank you. The volume of the tank, I said, is about 2.5 million litres or 660,000 gallons. I'm about 4.5–5 metres, 15 feet beneath the surface. The water temperature is delightful. About 26 degrees Celsius, which is 78–79 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's just perfect. This is our winter now. So this is about as cool as this tank will get. And our air temperature outside probably in the 80s today, comfortably in the 80s. I think were those the questions, Julie?
Yeah, and one other question, and it relates to the size of the Great Barrier Reef in football fields. Is that American football fields or soccer fields? What's that reference there?
We're talking regulation soccer pitches here. So if you follow the English Premier League or the World Cup, the Football World Cup, a regulation soccer pitch, they reckon close to 70 million of those soccer fields. So huge spatial scale, covers a large latitude range as well. And the length of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park would run down the west coast of the US. So that's the length of our Great Barrier Reef Marine Park.
And finally, before we do go to the animals in the coral reef here, can you just talk to us quickly about how you can talk to us from underwater? What is that mask, and how can we have internet underwater? So how are we
Yeah. Well, you might notice there's a bit of cabling going behind me. There's a few wires going out. So that's my communication umbilical. I've got a video and an audio cable spliced together, and it's got a bit of flotation running 60 meters to the surface, and then there's another cable run to the room that Julie's in. This is a Divator Mark II full face mask, really comfortable communication mask. My face stays dry, and it's a pleasure to wear. Easy to talk underwater. And Julie and Katie can say maybe a bit too easy for me to talk. Sometimes I rab it on. Now, Julie, that was great. Just keep firing questions at me as we go. But I wanted to introduce people to the true architects of the largest living coral reef system in the world, the corals. Now, behind me, we've got a lovely vase-shaped coral. And, they're waking up. So, corals, as a group of animals, can be likened to little upside down jellyfish. So, for example, if my hand was a jellyfish and the feeding, stinging tentacles of the jellyfish are my fingers, and I was to turn that upside down, that's your basic body shape of an individual coral polyp. Now, coral polyps live as a group or a colony, and we're looking at one colony here. And if I go in a bit closer, just trying to work out which bunch of polyps to focus on, I'm going to try and zoom in here. And as I go a bit closer still, you might be able to see these little upside down jellyfish-like animals with a small ring of tentacles poking out into the water to collect any food the currents deliver to them. In the middle of each whirl of tentacles, there is a mouth, and that mouth serves as their butt. So they're simple animals with a two-way gut. Food goes in and waste goes out. That's pretty amazing. Look at that. These are the builders of the largest coral reef system in the world. Now, if I go out a bit and I just buffet the water around and we go back in, now you see them, now you don't. They've disappeared and they've recessed into that limestone skeleton. But those little soft-bodied invertebrates lay down the calcium carbonate skeleton to protect and support their little soft bodies. And that is the substance of our Great Barrier Reef. This is a stony or hard coral. And if it were to die, then the limestone skeleton persists and becomes part of that reef framework that supports new coral colonies, and those corals make the habitat that an astonishing diversity of other marine animals depends upon. So our corals are the reef builders and the habitat formers for our amazing Great Barrier Reef biodiversity. Now, Julie, jump in with any questions that might come up, but what I thought I would just point out to people is, although we see a remarkable variety of shapes, a lettuce leaf coral here, we go down And we've got another type of coral here with big fleshy tentacles. I look around, we've seen a vase coral, we've got a bit of a brain coral here. Even so, we've got a diversity of coral shapes. We've got some similarity in colour. So the story of how corals feed is a little bit more than them just catching food out of the water column. Inside the living tissue of these coral animals is a symbiotic, single-celled organism that uses sunlight to make its own food and gives much of the food it makes to our corals. So our corals are pretty much solar-powered colonies, getting most of their energy from the sunlight. So they get their food or nourishment in two ways. Oh, look at this guy.
Oh, that's a really cool fish, Craig. What's that?
It's almost cartoon-like, isn't it? That's a hump-nose unicorn fish. And it's one of the key herbivores that we have in here. We've got different fish species in this tank, just a small sample of what you'd find in the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. So we would have possibly around 80 to 100 different species of coral reef fish in here, and a few more in our predator tank that we'll see. But on our Great Barrier Reef, in that marine park or Great Barrier Reef World Heritage Area, scientists are thinking well over 1,500, possibly closer to 2,000 species of fish live in this region. If I go a little bit closer to this cohort, you can see some of them in the background nibbling on the reef surface. These are doing their daily job of grazing. Grazing down the filamentous algae.
Craig, can you tell us what a couple of species of fish are that we have in there?
Certainly. So these orange band surgeonfish are really quite key herbivores. We've also got the gold-lined rabbitfish, another grazer or herbivore. I can see the blue tang or dory from Finding Nemo there. Another really important herbivore, and I keep emphasizing that, along with the likes of the parrotfish you may have heard of. They're really important in keeping the seaweed growth under control on a coral reef. And like everything in that reef community, they have a particular job or role to perform. So we have herbivores that do the gardening. Here's another surgeonfish. And I don't know if you can see on it, the base of its tail, there's a horizontal groove just in front of that white band. And that's where there's a very sharp, recessed, modified scale. Many of our surgeonfish have these, and that's where they take their name from. Even dory, the blue tang, has that very sharp scale on the base of its tail. And they can use that as a defensive weapon. So the name surgeonfish is in reference to that modified scale, and it's likened to the sharpness of a surgeon's scalpel. Oh,
Now,
look.
Craig, before we were talking about corals and how they're the building blocks of the reef, but not all corals have that hard skeleton, do they?
No, that's a fair point, Katie. We boast upwards of 600 species of coral on the Great Barrier Reef. The majority, around 450 species, are hard or stony corals. But you're right, there's well over 100 that are referred to as soft corals. And we've got quite a large soft coral community over here. Now, the soft corals are colonies of polyps, just like a hard coral, but they don't deposit a rigid limestone skeleton. But look at this. If I gently lift this up, oh wow, those soft corals, they're a colony of polyps supported by what we call spicules. Tiny little shards of limestone, like prickles inside the tissue, or the soft tissue, that provides some support to the colony, but also a bit of a deterrent too to predators. And as a habitat former, you can often have a look under the, oh, there you go, some more of them. Some things don't like coming out in the day. And down here, we've got a couple of these nocturnal sea cucumbers. Oh, there's a little wrasse. This is a little predator coming in to have a look if I've uncovered something tasty for it to go for. Very curious of the wrasses.
Now, Craig, we've got a few questions about corals. So how are corals formed, and if they die, how do they grow new coral? And how long does coral take to grow?
Yeah, some great questions. So corals as animals, you'll get sexual reproduction occurring with the colonies releasing their gametes or sex cells at different times of the year, or for the majority around the onset of late spring, early summer. And so by sex cells, I'm meaning eggs and sperm are shed into the water, and then the sperm fertilizes those planktonic eggs and a larval stage is formed. That larval stage of the coral might be in the plankton for a little time, floating around, and hopefully finds a nice, clean patch on the reef to settle, and metamorphoses into a founding polyp of a new colony. So our coral colonies typically start with a founding polyp, and the growth of a colony over time, and I might refer back to my favourite vase coral here, is through asexual budding or cloning of new polyps from ones that are already part of the colony. And for a vase coral like this, they're budding off new polyps at this edge. At this margin would be the growth margin of the colony. As to how long it can live, indefinitely if the conditions persist to its liking, that colony could go on living indefinitely. But there are disturbances and perturbations on the reef from cyclones or other impacts that can upset and bring to the end the life of a colony. How quick do they grow? Another good question. Let me just cast my eye around here. You've got slow growing boulder type corals like these here. They may be very slow growing and may only grow a few millimeters a year. And some of those faster staghorn or branching corals may grow many centimeters, 10, 20 or more centimeters in a good growing season. So growth rates do differ markedly between species.
Now, Craig, we have a couple of questions about corals and the threats to corals. So you did mention some, but what is the ideal temperature that corals thrive in?
Yeah,
and
that
how has
temperature would
climate
be
change
about...
affected coral reefs?
What it is at the moment's just perfect. Too, a bit of hunting going on here from a goatfish. But between about 22 degrees Celsius and 29 degrees Celsius is the lower and upper limit, respectively, that corals on the Great Barrier Reef do enjoy. There might be a bit of variability globally around those temperatures, but for our Great Barrier Reef, it's typically that. Now, as for impacts, threats to the Great Barrier Reef, well, they're increasing, it would seem. So although our Great Barrier Reef is big, beautiful and astonishingly diverse, it is under pressure like coral reefs around the world. Climate change is the #1 threat. We have other issues to do with water quality or changes in water quality over time. We've got coastal developments and possible impacts of fishing as well on coral reefs are all considered to be maybe the primary threats to their long-term health. But if I was to elaborate a little bit more about climate change, we've sadly seen a third mass bleaching or marine heat wave on our Great Barrier Reef in 5 years. And these temperature extremes that we may experience as a result of climate change through our summer months, that temperature gets above and beyond that upper limit that corals can tolerate. And that can bring about bleaching, which in itself is not the death of a colony, but if the bleaching or the stress is prolonged, then that can kill the coral colonies.
Craig?
So,
Craig, this is Neil. You can tell us the optimum temperature for the water, for them to strive there?
yep, I would say probably around this temperature. I might let Julie do the conversion. I would say about 27, 28 degrees is getting up towards what corals really enjoy. A little bit higher, it begins to get stressful. So
Craig,
yep.
the optimum temperature in Fahrenheit is around about 71 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit, sorry.
Very good. So we're sort of not far off that at the moment. It's a very comfortable temperature at this time of year.
Now, Craig, someone asked if we can get cold water corals. So what we're focusing on today are the reef building corals, aren't we?
Yes, certainly. So we're looking at shallow reef building corals, but you're quite right. And you do get other corals growing at far deeper depths in other parts of the world that wouldn't be anywhere near the tropics. I'm thinking even off the coast of the United Kingdom. You've got deep water corals, but what we're focused on here are these shallow tropical reef building corals, hermatypic corals that have that association with those single cell plant-like organisms that give them much of their color, much of their energy requirements to build the skeletons that build these reef structures. Now, I'm just going to go a little bit higher because my dive buddy was pointing up to the top. I see what he's referring to. Here's another unicorn fish. But just above it, we've got what looks like a massive spaghetti just on the reef crest. And I'll just move up a little bit higher. And this is a pair of our almost endemic Great Barrier Reef anemone fish. And they're living in a very close association with their host sea anemone. So here are our male and female anemone fish. The female's a slightly bigger, bossier one. They start off their life as males, and if they do happen to be the dominant individual in an anemone, they grow larger and turn from male to female. The female, as I say, is the dominant, aggressive defender of the anemone. So if anyone was to ask us, are there any fish that bite the divers here in the aquarium? It's certainly not the sharks. It'll be something like an anemone fish. They are very territorial, and with good reason. That sea anemone is their safe haven. It's everything to them. It's almost their home range. They don't drift far. from the shelter of these stinging tentacles. Let me just demonstrate. Best practice is not to touch anything, but I'm familiar with this animal, the sea anemone, and you can see it's grabbed hold of my finger there, and those stinging tentacles would be quite impactful on any small fish that might go into them, but not for the anemone fish. They have a close symbiotic association, a mutually beneficial association. They seek protection in the anemone when they need to, and they protect the anemone. So it's a win-win partnership between the two different species.
Now, Craig, how come the anemone stung you and stings other fish, but why doesn't it sting the clownfish?
That's because the anemone fish gradually acquires a coating of the slime or mucus that is on the tentacles. So the anemone doesn't sting itself. There'll be a layer of mucus upon those tentacles, and the anemone fish slowly acquire a coating of that so they can slip and slide without any ill effects through those stinging tentacles. Now, if we happen to remove the anemone fish from this exhibit, caught them out, put them in another tank for a few days, and then reintroduce them to this tank, they would need to slowly reacquire that mucus protection. So that's the reason they and they alone can swim through those tentacles. I might just drop down to the bottom, and on our soft sediment we've got a whole different community. You might recall that little goatfish hungrily feeding in the sand before. There's a lot of food on the sediment, in the sediment, and if we have a look around, we've got a recognisable animal here, the one with 5 arms. Just to give you some idea, this is one of over 135 species of sea stars that we have on our Great Barrier Reef. It's a Rhinoceros Sea Star. And what I'm going to do, again, best practice is hands off, but we're in an aquarium, and it's part of our animal husbandry to handle these gently. So I'll just, he's not really, he's half-hearted in its feeding, but in the middle here is where the mouth is, and I can see a little bit of its stomach tissue that's been pushed out of the mouth. You can think of our sea star here as a bit like a vacuum cleaner sitting upon the seabed and putting its stomach out through its mouth and digesting any organic matter that might be underneath it. And just over here we've got its closest cousin, and we saw a couple of nocturnal sea cucumbers earlier. We've got a wealth of other sea cucumbers. Again, on the reef, probably over 120 species to be found. I'll just get a bit closer to these, and we might be able to actually describe their feeding behaviour. This is the front end. The mouth will be at this end, and they have feathery-like feeding tentacles that pick up the sand. They don't want to eat the sand per se, they want to digest any organic matter that's part and parcel of that sediment. So the sediment and any nourishing food goes up and down along gut, and then it emerges the sand once again a little bit cleaner. So the droppings, the poop of your sea cucumber is just nice clean sand, and I can demonstrate. I'll pick that up for you. It's just beautiful clean sand. So our sea cucumbers, well, you could think of them a bit like the earthworms of the sand or the reef, turning over that sediment. Again, a bit like a vacuum cleaner, cleaning the sediment. Oh, look at here. It's almost like we've got an Econoderm party going on. The Econoderms are that group of animals, including your sea stars, sea cucumbers, and these spiky customers. And they're a little bit unusual. I wouldn't expect to see them out and about as the sun emerges here. But boy, overnight, don't they do a good job? And this is the sign of their hard work overnight. This is a bit of our reef surface that has this crazy white line, which is the grazing scar left behind by one of those sea urchins. So a bit like the sea star, their mouth is on the underside, but our sea urchins have 5 teeth they use to scrape away at that filamentous algae. My dive buddy Ryan's just handed me a bit of seaweed, so it's a good way to attract a few fish in.
Now, Craig, we have had a couple of questions about, is it dangerous on the reef? What are the dangers? How can you see the reef safely? Can you mention a couple of those types of things?
Yeah, sure. There are many different ways to see the Great Barrier Reef. Unfortunately, we can't have visitors to our aquarium or visitors from overseas just at the moment, but I would highly recommend when the opportunity arrives that you can pay a visit to the Great Barrier Reef. I'm going to lose my fingertips there. You can take that. At any time of the year. We're in our winter months, as I say, but there's so much to be enjoyed whatever time of year you visit the Great Barrier Reef. I'm looking forward to going diving in the next couple of weeks at a very popular dive site. It's a shipwreck with astonishing diversity, big fish there, and we sometimes hear whales. So I'm a diver, I enjoy getting underwater, but you don't need to. If you prefer to float along at the surface, you can still get into the water and snorkel. That's a wonderful way of seeing the reef. It's really, really easy and light on equipment. Mask, fin, snorkel, stinger suit or wetsuit, and away you go. But you can see the reef underwater by keeping dry. You can take a glass bottom boat cruise. You can get a bit higher still, and you can take a flight over the Great Barrier Reef. And that's one of the most scenic experiences you could imagine. So many different things to see, or ways to see the reef, and at any time of year, there's something amazing. So yeah, when the opportunity presents, keep it in mind. The Great Barrier Reef is still amazingly great.
Fantastic, Craig. Now, we've seen a variety of organisms from this particular area in the tank, but a few people have asked us, are we going to see any sharks? And I'm thinking this is a good opportunity to go and see some sharks now.
Sounds good, Julie. Just find where my dive buddy is. I'll give him the thumbs up, you should see that. So that means we'll go to the surface then. I'll take my 60 metres of cable and the camera, and we'll hop into a similar depth of water, but with some bigger fish. And at this time of day, we could be able to get quite close, fingers crossed, to some of our sharks, like we've got the Leopard Shark, what you might call a zebra shark in the US, and we've got some reef sharks too. So, all right, Julie, we'll get out now, and we'll see you from underwater in the shark tank soon.
Okay, Craig.
All right, so we'll
Craig.
switch back to us in the studio. Here we go. All right, now we've got a couple of minutes while Craig jumps on out of our coral reef exhibit and jumps into our predator tank, where some of those larger animals are. Now, we've had a lot of questions come through our question and answer during that time, so we might see if we can answer a few of those questions or a few more of them while we are waiting for Craig to jump into the predator tank. So, Julie, what are some of the questions that we've had come through?
Well, actually, what I might do, I can even see if anyone wants to ask the questions live. So I'm going to start with Ryan Pearson. If you had your hand raised, I'm just going to hit allow to talk and unmute your microphone. If you had a question, let us know. Just got to unmute you. Three seconds.
being a little slow today. Still morning for us. It hasn't completely woken up yet.
Okay.
There we go. Ryan, did you have a question?
Yes. What would happen if you stuck one of your fingers in one of the coral polyps that he showed us?
Oh, well, a lot of those polyps are very small, so it'd be hard to get your finger into the polyp itself. There are some types of corals that can sting you, so things like fire corals, so you're not going to want to try and touch them. The general recommendation when you're out on the reef, and something I always try and abide by, is look but don't touch anyway. That way you are making sure you're protecting yourself and you are protecting those animals as well. So definitely wouldn't recommend trying and putting your finger in a polyp, but as you saw with the ones that Craig showed you, a lot of them are very small anyway, so you wouldn't actually be able to get your finger in there.
Okay, so I'm going to, we might take one from the question and answer sessions. Just going through.
There's over 200 questions in there, so bear with us, and we do apologise if we don't get to all of your questions today.
Okay. Just going through. Well, maybe, Katie, can you recap if any of the fish have any types of specific roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's all types of different fish, as you saw in our coral reef exhibit. They definitely play different roles out on the reef. Things like your herbivores, they're your grazers. They're eating the algae, the seagrass, and those sorts of things. And they particularly play a really important role because algae and coral compete for space. And coral is much slower at growing than algae is. So the herbivores, they keep that algae level down, which means there's less competition for the corals, which means there's plenty of room for them to grow. So that's one important group of animals. You've got what's also known as Detroitables. They're things like those sea cucumbers that we saw. They're cleaning up the sediment, getting rid of things like fish poo and any degrading bits of fish or algae that might be in there. They're keeping everything nice and clean. And you've got your predators as well. So they sit towards the top of the food chain. They keep all of the other species underneath them in check. And then right at the very top, that's where your apex predators are. So things like your sharks that we will see very soon. So definitely lots of different species, all playing very different but very, very important roles out on the reef.
Now, I have someone, Andrea, sorry. I'm going to just allow you to talk and disable your microphone. So just waiting for that to come through. And unmuting. No, you had your hand raised for quite a while. Wait for that one. Okay, we'll just wait for the microphone to unmute on that particular one, but we'll just keep taking some questions from the chat area as well.
Okay,
so is the Great Barrier Reef the biggest coral reef?
It is a very large coral reef. There are a few big ones, but yes, it is, as far as I'm aware, it is the largest coral reef. Sorry, again, it's morning, it's still early. But there are a lot of other coral reefs around as well, and some that are quite large. What we might do is maybe grab one more question, because I can see Craig getting ready in our predator tank. So Julie, is there one more question?
Actually, some of the questions are about the sharks, so maybe we'll cross straight to Craig and then he can answer some of those about how many species of sharks we have on the Great Barrier Reef and those types of things. So I think we might as well answer those questions while we are looking at the sharks themselves. So Katie, I'll get you to cross back.
Absolutely. Alrighty. So we do have Craig now in our predator tank, and he'll be able to answer those questions that we've got about sharks. So here we go, once again, going for a dive in 3, 2, 1. Hi, Craig.
G'day, Katie, and welcome back, everybody. So Ryan and I are now in it's actually slightly cooler in this tank. Still very comfortable, but we're in our predator tank. And just a quick definition of a predator is anything, regardless of size, that makes a living by catching, killing, and eating other living things. So even the little fish that you see around, the little damselfish that we have in hundreds, if not thousands in this tank, they're little planktivores or feed on small larval stages of other animals floating around in the water column. At least that's what they would do out on the reef. But I guess you want to see some of these beauties. This is a little reef shark, black-tip reef shark swimming by. We have 3 of those, and at their largest, they'd be about 5 feet in length. Pretty small sharks, but one of those ones that you might be lucky to catch a glimpse of. Swimming by, they're very innocuous, very timid, very shy animals. As I say, it's the damselfish, like the clownfish, that can be a little bit tenacious and territorial. Give the divers a little nip from time to time, not the sharks though. And I guess I didn't really answer the question earlier about, is it dangerous? I guess visiting the Great Barrier Reef is only as dangerous as you make it. If you're sensible, you don't interact with the animals, you keep a safe distance from the reef, that is, so you're not going to get any coral cuts, you're going to have a wonderful experience. Now, I've got one of my favourite sharks down here. This is what you might call a zebra shark. Due to their colours as a juvenile, they've got stripes, a bit like a zebra. But as an adult, they get their leopard-like spots. Now, I'm just going to adjust the cabling on my camera so I can rest the camera down. Bear with me a moment, folks. And we might be able to get a bit closer to our lovely leopard shark. Lolly is her name. She's actually born here at the aquarium. We've had lots of successful captive breeding with leopard sharks. And although we sadly have no male to continue that program with anymore, these female leopard sharks, that's not letting them slow down. They're still able to lay eggs with viable embryos through parthenogenesis. Oh, this is the older of the 2. This is Leone. Let's have a look at Leone. There's a benthic predator.
Now, Craig,
yep.
We're just going to stop you for a tick. Can you just make sure you keep your camera nice and still?
Yep.
Just had a camera flicker then, so I just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
Keep it nice and still there. Thanks.
So, this is our leopard shark resting. Now, if you've heard that sharks need to keep swimming all the time, that's not true for all species. For our blacktips, certainly, they need to ventilate their gills by ramming that water in their mouth as they swim. But over to the right, you'll see the gill slits of the shark moving. So she has musculature that allows her to effectively pump water over her gill. So she could sit here all day and rest the day away on the sea floor.
Now, Craig, can you zoom in a little bit closer on her mouth? Because she doesn't have your stereotypical scary shark teeth, does she?
No, I'll see how close I can get. I'm pushing my luck, of course. Let me just go a little bit more.
So you're using the zoom really well there, Craig, so we can see the teeth.
Good.
Love this camera.
So we've got 2 nostrils at the high up on the snout, 2 little barbels just on the inside of each nostril. And across that upper lip, if you like, of the snout, she's got these little jelly-filled pores. And she uses that to detect the biological electricity given off by muscle contractions in other animals. So a bit like our goatfish was hunting through the sand, this shark can do that as well. She can basically do a headstand and use that snout and blow water into the sand to uncover tasty animals that might be hiding there. So that's Leone, our leopard shark. I'll just move out a little bit, get my...
Now, Craig, it's not something that I would ever recommend, but here at Reef HQ, sometimes we do need to handle our animals for husbandry reasons. So what do sharks feel like?
Well, I don't know if I'm gonna...
Maybe just tell us what it feels like, Craig.
I've got to try and touch it. The skin is quite rough. What they have in the way of protection are little skin teeth all over their body. And these dermal denticles, as they're known, provide not only some physical protection against abrasions or scratches, but they also allow the water to flow over the animal a little bit easier. So I don't know if I can even get in close here. Watch this. If I get in right up and zoom in, you might be able to see some texture on the skin, and those are those little scales or skin teeth, dermal denticles, that provide that protection, but also give a little bit of a rough texture if you do run your hand over the shark, particularly this way. That's going against the grain, so that's a bit rougher than running from head to tail.
Now, as Katie mentioned, in this aquarium, that's part of the animal checks that we do with husbandry. So when you're out on the reef, if you see a shark, most sharks are quite timid, actually. It's pretty special if you get to see one, but I normally just relax and observe them from a distance.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, it doesn't escape us here. It's something that we're very privileged to be able to get this close to many animals that you wouldn't get the opportunity to on the reef. Now, this suckerfish is just hanging around here because there was a cleaner checking it out. So we've got a number of cleaner wrasse in here, and they will give each of these larger fish a bit of a clean at different times through the day.
Now, Craig, I was also wondering what people can do no matter where they are around the world watching. We've got quite a number of continents, I believe, viewing this today, people from different continents. What can you do to help reefs worldwide?
Oh, I think if you're acting locally, and our collective actions globally will contribute to a healthier planet. So I keep in mind reduce, reuse, recycle as a mantra that can be used every day. I'm going to reduce my carbon footprint. I'm going to reduce the use of single-use plastics. I'm going to reduce my energy consumption. Get out of that throwaway lifestyle we've been encouraged to live by, but don't throw stuff away, reuse it, repurpose it, and if it really has no more life to it, then you recycle it. So if you follow the reduce, reuse, recycle mantra, then that's a great start. That's going to help out your local environment, improve the health of the planet, and will also contribute to the health of our Great Barrier Reef, because climate change is the #1 threat now and into the future for our Great Barrier Reef.
Craig?
Now, I just wanted to check with Professor Phillip if you had any messages that you would like to pass on.
I just want to say, Craig, we have a lot of chemistry students in here. We have a lot of, like Dr. Sunej Hans, Paramita Sen, we have Sheila Cullenberg, a lot of chemistry students. What is the pH like in the water? And how does you want to tell the students how pH affects the health of the reef, especially the corals?
Yes, well, it's one of those more long-term threats to the reef, and a component of a changing climate is through ocean acidification. We'll see a reduction in that pH level. Now, typically our corals, as limestone building colonies, they like the pH to sit about 8.3. Now, when we talk about ocean acidification, we're not going to see our oceans go acidic per se, but we'll see that alkalinity decline and become a little bit more acidic, a little bit closer to 8 or below 8. And at that level, it'll be harder for not only corals, but also other animals with calcareous components with calcium carbonate as part of their body, things like shellfish or even your Econoderms, your sea urchins, your sea stars, for them to build robust body structures will get harder to do. So the more that we put carbon emissions into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide dissolving into the water, forming a carbonic acid, is the cause of that ocean acidification. It's not immediately apparent, but this is a concern. If we continue on the trajectory that we are at the moment, we'll see a shift in the ocean's chemistry and a change in that pH over time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I was just wondering if there was anything else that you would like to add, Craig, before we finish our session today.
I was just seeing one of our big grouper over here with its mouth open, so I was going to sneak over here. It looks very pale. These big fish just sit on the seafloor. He's been cleaned. Just see if I can see that. But look, I would like to say thank you very much to everyone for joining us today, wherever you may be. Thank you so much for those questions. I know it's a big group and we've only been able to share that interaction around a few. But thank you so much for joining us and contributing to our session today. So what I might do in the way of a sign off from underwater, from Ryan and myself, is thank you, and please enjoy the rest of your day wherever you may be. So Craig and Ryan signing off from underwater at Reef HQ, Great Barrier Reef Aquarium in North Queensland, Townsville. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, Craig and Ryan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Fred, did you have anything you'd like to add before we go?
I would just like to say thank you all for taking some time to join us today in North Queensland, Australia, here on the Great Barrier Reef. We truly look forward to maintaining our great relationship with the City University of New York and with all of you that have joined us today. So I know our education team are so very passionate about sharing their knowledge about the Great Barrier Reef with others. And so we would love to continue on our lifelong learning journey with you all. So have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you all again soon. And I don't know whether my mate Neil wants to say anything before we sign off.
Hi, Fred. Yeah, thank you, Fred, again for this great opportunity for, again, mentioning we have students from CUNY, a lot of students in the City University of New York from 22 different units. We have 800 students right now. We have students from Senegal, like still Senegal is on, Canada. We have Trinidad, Tobago. Tobago has a reef in Tobago. Also, my teacher from French teachers there. We have Greg Bruce. Greg is on as well, Fred. Greg is the one who started this collaboration and brought us to Townsville. So Greg is on right now. So Greg, thank you for this collaboration and building this partnership with Townsville and Great Barrier Reef, and Fred and Ross McClellan as well. So, you know, it's a great opportunity for us. And we hope to continue it in the future, in the near future, actually. Yeah. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And that's why then the teachers who are here, Dr. Sunaj Hans, Paramita Sen, Sheila Cullen, Sunil Bhaskaran, all the people in CUNY who have, who really put the students and helped to make this possible. We'd like to thank them as well, okay? So thank you all the professors and all the students for taking part as well. My Chem 13, Chem 17 classes as well. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Well, from Reef HQ here in Townsville, we'll say a nice big thank you to everyone for joining us. We do hope you all learnt something, and we hope you all enjoyed today's session as well. Once again, thank you all for joining us and enjoy the rest of your evening.